Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to another edition of the DVD Shelf Foreign Flicks, the show that would rather high-five a good movie than shoot the face off a bad one. Today I will be reviewing the first sequel to a movie I reviewed in an earlier episode. So buckle in and prepare yourselves for my review of the 2014 Indonesian action fest, The Raid 2. A few years ago when I was just starting out, I decided for my first episode to review one of my favorite modern action and martial arts films, The Raid Redemption. This movie took the martial arts film world by storm, featuring jaw-dropping violence not typically seen in such films, in addition to numerous well-crafted set pieces, stunning choreography, great directing, and a simple yet engaging plot to tie it all together. It was a perfect storm that makes this an action film I still love to watch. However, for writer and director Gareth Evans, that was merely a filler movie made because he didn't have the budget for the more ambitious film he wanted to make, which he was tentatively calling Barandal. And so he quickly wrote and then directed a film with an attainable budget, that being The Raid Redemption, with the hopes of earning the funding for Barandal. While making The Raid, he began to look back at his original script and realized that with a few adjustments, he could turn Barandal into a sequel for The Raid. The success of that film allowed him to gain the funding he needed for Barandal, retitled The Raid 2 after a series of rewrites, and a new, brutal action fest was born. Be aware that some spoilers for The Raid Redemption are contained within. The film picks up a couple hours after the end of The Raid Redemption as some of the loose ends are cleaned up, including Rama's brother and the other surviving Strike Force members, leaving Rama as the only character from the first film with a notable presence in this one. Rama is recruited by the head of a secret task force that's trying to root out corruption in the police by infiltrating the local criminal enterprise led by Kingpin Bangun. To this end, they place Rama undercover in a prison to allow him to get close to Bangun's ambitious son, Ucho, which Rama is able to do after he saves him during an attempted hit inside the prison. A few years pass and Rama is finally released. In order to repay the debt for saving his life, Ucho brings Rama into his father's organization, where he proves useful, quickly gaining their trust. While there, a new criminal element emerges, led by the calculating Bejo and his trio of deadly assassins, who aim to start a turf war between Bangun and a powerful Japanese gang. With everything coming down around him, Rama decides to take justice into his own hands, going after Bejo to stop the warring once and for all. This film feels drastically different from the first one. Whereas the prior film was a straightforward action movie light on story and heavy on mayhem, this one is a mix of gangster movie and action martial arts film. This means we actually have a layered story that is good enough to keep us engaged as we take some deep breaths between the intense action set pieces. Well, speaking of the action, as good as the first one is, this is even better. The choreography and cinematography are even more ambitious than the first time around, with writer and director Gareth Evans employing lengthier and more complicated, amazing single-take action scene moments, in addition to an increase in brutality as people are stabbed, shot, cut, burned, broken, run over, smashed, thrown, hammered, battered, slammed, and pummeled. And much like the first film, we are treated to some action that doesn't always directly revolve around our protagonist, though this time it's more noticeable as we get a few impressive fights involving various side characters without Rama, instead of just one like in the first film. One such side character that is the focus of a couple of fight scenes is portrayed by the returning actor Yayan Ruhian, who is playing a completely different and still supremely badass character this time, since, the last one is suffering from a bit of a rip throat problem. However, this added focus on side characters doesn't just come with more fighting, but added depth and characterization, making a few of these supporting characters a bit more well-rounded. With all of the added focus on story and characters, in addition to the increase in action, this film is 50 minutes longer than its predecessor, clocking in at a staggering 2 hours and 30 minutes. It might not sound all that long if this were a drama, but for a high-octane action movie that bombards the viewer with intense fights and brutality, that is incredibly unusual, and part of what helps set this film apart from other action flicks. However, with all that being said, there are some downsides to this film. The plot largely works well, but there are some flaws. There are a couple of plot points throughout that aren't as smooth and coherent as they could be, and then there's the beginning and ending. The problem with the beginning is that it aggressively wraps up the events of the prior film, brushing them under the rug as if they never happened, with virtually no reference to the events of that film popping up again. It all felt kind of forced. And to a point, I get it. The Raid 2 was written first, and it wasn't until he was producing the Raid Redemption that it occurred to him to turn Barandal into the Raid 2, meaning he had to force the outcome of the raid to fit into the opening of Barandal, a square peg into a round hole, as it were. And so he did his best, writing out the other characters instead of trying to add them throughout the already completed script. But just because I get why it was done, doesn't mean I have to like it. For my issue with the ending, I'll have to get a bit spoilery. After Rama deals with the antagonist as he sees fit, he leaves. So far, so good. And then as he exits, he is met by the Japanese gang that was on their way to deal with those same people that Rama just dealt with. There are a few lines of audio-free dialogue without subtitles, and then Rama says, "No, I'm done." And it ends. Now, we can certainly make our own assumptions about what was asked. Perhaps, are they still alive? Or, you should come work for us. Or maybe even, do you still collect Beanie Babies? It is a fairly odd creative decision because we really don't know for sure what was said. Now, if you stroll through online comments by fans of the movie, you'll find there are a few different interpretations, most seeming to skew towards the Japanese gang offering him a job, which is also my assumption. But with the gang still blocking his path and Rama's handler racing to the scene, some interpret the ending a bit more negatively, as in the gang is going to kill Rama too since they have no reason to trust him. Perhaps it'll make more sense if we ever get that third film in the series, which, as of now, hasn't even begun production yet, 5 years later. Initially, Evans stated that he intended the threequel to pick up immediately where this one left off, or even just prior to the closing moments, and I was okay with that. However, more recently, Evans has made some comments that imply an uncertainty in a continuation of this series, and so for some, this ending will not be a completely satisfying conclusion. Fortunately, these elements, as questionable as they may be, don't ruin the experience as they are such a small portion of the overall film. The special features are plentiful on this Blu-ray release, with 3 of them being Blu-ray exclusive. First off is the standard commentary and trailers. Then we have a Blu-ray exclusive deleted scene titled Gang War, which is a fully polished and completed scene in which the two gangs engage in a brutal, bloody, close-quarter shootout. I'm not entirely sure where it's supposed to fit into the story, though I have a guess, and as much as adding more action into this type of film seems like a good idea, I can see why it was cut since it didn't really add anything. We are also treated to 2 behind-the-scenes specials full of interviews with Gareth Evans, most of the key actors, and various other crew members, from producers to stunt coordinators and the directors of photography. First is The Next Chapter, Shooting a Sequel, which is a 10-minute overview of the filming process as they talk briefly about specific aspects of the film, including choreography, stunt work, the story, and characters. Part 2, a Blu-ray exclusive, is Ready for a Fight, On Location, a 13-minute special that gives a quick overview of some of the location scouting, music scoring, editing, and scene composition that went into this film. We are also treated to a 44-minute Cinefamily Q&A session with Gareth Evans, Iko Uwais, and composer Joe Trapanesa. This lengthy special provides some interesting insight from Evans and Trapanesa, but sadly Uwais was fairly quiet given his limited English at the time, having to rely on Evans' lacking translation skills. Lastly, there is a 20-minute Blu-ray exclusive titled A Violent Ballet, The Choreography. As the title suggests, this largely talks about the process of choreographing and putting together the amazing fight scenes, with interviews from Evans, Uwais, and producer Aram Tertsakian. All of these specials are pretty wonderful, providing a plethora of behind-the-scenes footage in conjunction with informative and interesting interviews. However, with that being said, there is a lot of repetition here, typically from Evans, who retells the same stories or thoughts he had during production across numerous specials, sometimes almost word for word as if it's a rehearsed speech he said 1,000 times. Now, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but it just makes for some redundant material. Ultimately, this is a groundbreaking action movie. It might not seem like it at first glance, but when you combine all of the elements contained within, it really feels like one of a kind. I'm having a hard time thinking of another movie that has this level of action, and I don't just mean the high quantity, but also the impressive quality from the choreography to the cinematography, in addition to a story with some substance, brutal violence, and the runtime from an epic drama. Certainly, not everything works, such as the questionable choice to make the first film seem irrelevant. However, this is still a great action movie that does everything bigger and better than the first film, and so I give it a 5. This is one of the most intense, fun, and action-filled movies I've ever seen, and quite frankly, one of my favorites. If you consider yourself a fan of action movies, you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't watch this, as it has some of the most adrenaline-pumping, well-crafted action sequences committed to film. It's uncertain if the powerhouse trio of Gareth Evans, Iko Uwais, and Yayan Ruhian will reunite to bring us another masterpiece of action cinema that can stand up against the John Wick series, but I would be overjoyed if they did. However, with so many years having passed and still not a peep about it, while Evans writes and directs other films, and Uwais signs on to a new Netflix show in addition to lending his ass-kicking abilities to a variety of movies, I suppose the possibility of getting a third-rate film is about as likely as that long-rumored American remake of The Raid Redemption. Now, as disappointing as it may be to not get a third film, I am glad that they're finding the success that they deserve, and I only hope they continue to pump out high-quality entertainment. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and be sure to leave a comment, high five, random phrase, compliment, or piece of cake below. And as always, be sure to visit HappyDragonPictures.com and follow us on Facebook to stay up to date with all of our releases. For the DVD Shelf Foreign Flicks, this is Razu Quinn Fee, reminding you not to climb the fence.